So in our shower, I keep this one here like this. Of course. Of course. What is up? Welcome to Cutting Up. I'm your host Mac, and you saw the title of this video. Let's get straight into it on how I clean my razors and some things that I avoid doing. Now, surprisingly, on this topic, I did a quick YouTube search and I couldn't really find a lot of videos. There were some videos that were teaching you how to clean a safety razor, even how to clean a straight razor, and then like your electrics, your trimmers, and so forth. But I really couldn't find anything teaching you how to clean the major brand razors, something like this. Now, to be fair, they did have one video from them telling you how to do it, but it was very basic. It was basically run water and get a brush. They did touch on one thing that I want to pass on that I have found to be true, is not to do the whole tapping on the sink with it. And if they're warning you about it and they want you to buy more razors in the long run, it really does mess with the performance of the razor. I find it more effective to just swash it back and forth underneath running water, preferably warm water, and I'll demonstrate that in a few minutes. Now, there are a couple of different cleans. There is the after every use clean and a deep clean. I'm going to be going over both of those. I waited for all my razors to need one, and yes, I have more than one razor. I have one razor that I kind of keep in the shower. I have one razor that I keep for just my face and under the neck, and then I have another razor that I use on my head for when I do my shave on the sink. I wouldn't necessarily say is a necessity, it's more a preference. I feel like when I have the multiple razors and I'm not just using the one head, that they wear a little bit better and I get a little bit more use out of them. One of the things that drives me crazy about this razor is this. Now, the major brand razor will lay down like this, and what I find is I have left this on the sink wet before, and what ends up happening is the little strip here that's supposed to be some kind of bump guard will actually stick to the surface. So it's one of the most annoying design features that I find about the razor. If you roll it over, you can see that it's not really intended for the razor to stay like this. Now, they do have their little kit like I have for this that you can place on it, but they're bulky. They also do have these, and again, these are very easy to lose, but the safest bet is if you can hang them up through this area here, which I'm going to show you where you run into a problem with another design that they have, but I'll show you where I hang the one that I keep in the shower. I keep this one just like this. And what that allows is, if you see, when it's hanging up, it's not touching anything, and it keeps it in a nice dry area where it's not going to be stuck to anything and not messing with the safety part. Now, as I said, one of their other designs is this one, and this you run into with that pivoting head a little bit of an issue. The thing is, obviously, in that voided space now is this pivoting piece meant to make the razor move, so you can't get to hang this up. So this one poses a little bit of a problem. My two that I keep by the sink, I keep in a cup on the side here, and they're standing up usually like this, and they have the covers on them. That actually solves the problem that I have with this design, because I can just kind of stand this up. But for the most part, this is not the best as far as the design. But you didn't come to this video to watch a review on the razor, you came to learn how I clean these, so let me get straight to that. So I have quite a few of them to clean here. I'm going to clean these all using the same methods or similar methods. I did do a quick Google search and see what I could find, reading a couple different articles, and I kind of found the advice to be vague and kind of general, pretty much the same thing, which was just use a brush, and to avoid the same thing that Gillette was telling you, not bang it on the side, don't share your razors, which had nothing to do with actually cleaning it. Now, there is one thing that after reading has made a lot of sense to me. I will probably implement going forward, but you won't see me do in this video. There's going to be two deviations from what I researched from what I actually implement. So the first deviation away from what I would probably suggest you try for yourself, a lot of people will suggest that if you are going to use a soap or a cleanup, which I will go ahead and make sure that you know that Gillette doesn't say it's necessary for you to use harsh cleaners. What they suggest is using dish soap. Dish soap makes a lot of sense, and I would implement using that in the future, because if you think about it, what are you cleaning with dish soap? You're cleaning utensils. Not only that, you are intending to consume consume from, but are also intended to keep those utensils clean and keep them from rusting. So I do like the suggestion of this soap. But in our household, we use Dr. Brahma's. This is a Castile soap. This is the most famous one that I know of. It is perfect for me because we can bathe with this. And you got to think about this. Your razor is going to go against your skin. You want to use something that you would possibly put against your skin. They say to stay away from hand soap, I guess more because it's a harsh thing. They're more worried about you using said razor now afterward. If it's a soap that you wouldn't put on your skin, I wouldn't suggest using it on your razor. Now, one of the things that I take into consideration is also, is whatever I'm going to clean with or disinfect with going to cause rust? I prefer things like hydrogen peroxide in a lot of cases that people use alcohol. This is not one of those cases. Hydrogen peroxide is going to be oxidizing and will cause rust. So in this case, it's not the best thing to use on your blades. And if you see how professional barbers do it, you'll usually see those disinfection jars, albeit they're not just rubbing alcohol. Those things are great for disinfecting, and also once dried off properly will keep the blade from rusting. What I use is rubbing alcohol that I have in a spray. This gets to the other major deviation. I kind of touched on it with the jar. Now in a deep clean or a disinfectant, what they end up doing in a lot of cases is they'll take their razor and kind of stick the razor head down into like a container, something like this, that is filled with rubbing alcohol. I actually like this method, but for how often I do my cleans, I just don't find that to be cost effective to fill this with alcohol, because once I use it, I'm not going to reuse it again after I get all that soap scum and gunk off the razor. So I prefer to use this with warm water, kind of slosh it around in there if I'm not running it directly under the hot water coming out of the faucet, and then take it out, spray it with some alcohol vigorously. The other thing I suggest, or I try to do, is make sure that I'm very careful about drying it. When I dry my blade, I make sure that I don't use a very rough material. It is going to be the best thing, and you're gonna see, because I'm not just gonna be cleaning blades, I'm also going to be cleaning my micro needle and also a straight razor, as well as a pair of scissors. These methods that I'm going to be using, while they slightly vary, I can use pretty much on all of these items, and I find that I'm able to keep my blades extremely clean and I never run into any issues with razor bumps. Now, they can be done to hair cutting techniques that can make you more susceptible to razor bumps, as well as just genetics. Some people are just more prone to those things, but what I find for myself, whenever I've ever had any issues with any kind of razor bumps, it has always been down to how clean or the lack of cleaning my blade properly. So I stay very meticulous about that. Let's get into it. So first thing, run the water, make sure that it gets to hot. And again, this is a suggestion from Gillette. What I avoid is banging it on the side or anything like that, and I just slosh it back and forth. If you watch some of my previous videos, you might even hear that sound, and that's what is going on right there. Now, to get deeply into the razor, I will use a brush, where I get a designated toothbrush, get a little bit of Dr. Brahma soap, and for efficiency, now that the water is hot, I'll put to the side a little bit of warm water. At the top end of the brush, I get behind here, and another thing that I try to do is a brush downward in one stroke. Now what I find is, if I don't do that, what tends to happen is you will end up getting the bristles in there, and besides cutting up the bristles in there, you end up clogging up the razor with the bristles of the brush. So I find that I have to be very purposeful in the direction that I put it in, and careful about that. Kind of press down the bristles into the razor, brush it down, not too hard or it can get stuck. Again, wash under warm water. All in one direction. This is where I get the alcohol involved. And I make sure I'm very thorough about that. And then I just dry it from there. And that's pretty much it. From there, I just kind of dry this. Like I said, I'm very careful what I dry it with. I don't use like tissue or anything like that. That's just going to get caught up in here. And I don't use too harsh of like a towel or anything like that, because besides leaving lint in it, again, you can dull the blades. So you have to be careful with what you use. I'm going to be trying to use microfiber in the future, and be very careful about which direction you're rubbing this thing and how your hand is behind it, because you can cut yourself. I have never seriously cut myself, but I've left a cut or two on a fingertip, not being careful about doing that. Now, for the average person, what I showed you guys so far is good enough, especially because you're probably not cleaning 4 or 5 razors like a maniac like me. But if you're trying to preserve water, you can use this method here. This is simply just the same warm water that I had running from the faucet with your added soap in there. And I'm going to try this method where I dunk it in there and I kind of just slosh it around in the warm water. I'm essentially doing the same thing that I was doing with it under the running faucet. Now, in my opinion, while this does save water, this is not as effective to me personally, because while I am saving water, I'm not getting the force of that aerated faucet kind of forcing through. So I find that this doesn't really get out as much debris. It does help, and I'm making sure that I'm not banging it on the side of the jar that I'm using. So obviously, if you use something bigger, you'll have more space to kind of slosh this around. And then you can again use the same method with brushing it. As you can see, I'm kind of using both the razor going back and forth and the brush. Now, also handy is if you get one of these usually come with trimmers and stuff like that. This is one that is intended to kind of get down into these kind of bristles. But what I find is this right here, I kind of get them stuck, and I'm not a fan of that at all. End up trying to get them out, and what you're gonna see is I'm gonna end up cutting almost all of these bristles right off. I'm sure I'm doing something wrong, but that has always been my experience with using these. This is how this ends up. I end up throwing these out all the time. One thing about this brushing method, it's not very kind to this bumper thing here. You will see that those wear down when you clean like this. But I'm more concerned with the cleanliness of the blade than this bumper guard thing more than anything. So I'll sacrifice that in the long run. Try what works for you out of the two. Like I said, this is the first time I've done it. I've always just run it underneath the faucet, as I showed you beforehand. And the other thing that I deviate from is the whole sitting it for 5 minutes in alcohol. I just thoroughly spray it down with alcohol and then dry it and leave it somewhere hanging up so it can dry thoroughly, and just take it from there. I don't have any reasons why I don't use the alcohol method, other than it just don't find it to be cost effective to fill up something every time that I can submerge the heads in. Otherwise, if I could afford it, I'd probably be doing it that way. For these last two, is just gonna be rinse and repeat. So let's just fast forward through doing that, and let's get to something fun, something a little different. A straight razor. Now, the straight razor, obviously, one of the things you're gonna do is what you're cleaning is the actual blade itself and not your handle. So the best way to keep this from getting rusty is keep this from getting wet altogether. I'm not gonna really run this under the water, as I'm going to kind of just brush it clean. Even though there is some water element here, I'm not gonna run it underneath there because it's just one blade. I'm not really trying to get gunk off of it. I think I can thoroughly clean this with this action, and then I just thoroughly dry it, and that's pretty much it. Now, obviously, you're working with something dangerous, and wet hands are your enemy in this situation. I'm not gonna run this under the faucet. Put this back in, and same treatment. Now please, as always, I am not an expert. I am far from it. I am just some guy on YouTube trying his best to clean up his game. So if you guys have suggestions or you have any kind of advice in the comment section, I am more than willing to listen and try to implement those myself. Make sure this is thoroughly dry. The thing about my straight razor in particular, when it's folded up, I don't have to worry about the blade sitting anywhere where it is not going to dry. But I would normally leave it kind of like this, kind of open, making sure that it's dry before I close it all the way up and put it away. The scissors I pretty much treat the same way as I do the straight razor. I never really run water directly on these. The most I might do is give them a spray with some alcohol, and I make sure that I thoroughly wipe this down to make sure that it dries. I'm gonna skip the scissors. It's pretty much rinse and repeat as a straight blade, and I'm sure you can find barbers on here suggesting how to care for those things much better. They'll probably have some elements of using some kind of oil to make sure that you lubricate the moving parts in the scissors and so forth. I'm gonna get into this now. Not everyone is going to have a micro needle roller, but I treat this the same way that I treat the razors. I run water underneath this, I thoroughly dry this, and I brush it. So let's get to it. One thing that I try to do with this when I clean this is, even though I'm going to brush on this, I'm going to try to make sure that when I do dry this, or even as I'm brushing through this, I try to be kind of gentle with this because these are micro needles. I don't want these little needles to bend because then they are not effective. This can be used on trying to grow in a more full beard and those things. So even if you aren't a baldy like me, it is something that I can find multiple uses for, and I'm sure you could too. Once again, I get my alcohol. Now again, because these are micro needles, I'm not gonna get very harsh in rubbing this. What I kind of do is just kind of pat it dry. And as I'm patting it dry, it will kind of roll. So you kind of pat and it rolls, pat and it rolls. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. Pat it and roll it, dry. Make sure that I don't have any lint or anything left on it, because remember, I'm gonna roll this right across my scalp. Some people use it to grow in their beard in more fuller areas and those things. And that's pretty much it. That is what I do. This is my methods for cleaning. Now the only real difference that I do between this and a deep clean is in a deep clean situation, which I rarely do because most of the time with those like Gillette or big box razor companies, the head will kind of wear away from me personally before I'll need to do like a thorough cleaning. I will do that kind of alcohol soak, leave it for about 3 minutes soaking, and then remove it from there and then dry it in the same method. But that's pretty much the only deviation from that and an everyday kind of clean. Now, am I doing this whole setup every day? Usually not. I kind of just spot clean my razors in total without me having to stop and look up at the camera and explain. It maybe takes about 10 minutes, but again, when you're taking care of yourself and making sure that you're not giving yourself razor bumps on any of the places that you shave, it's imperative. And speaking of a shave, it looks like I need one right about now. So if you don't mind, I'm going to leave you guys be. So until the next time we're cutting up, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one. One last thing. Make sure that you clean the things that you're cleaning with. So thoroughly wash this out after you're done, because it doesn't make any sense to try to clean something with something dirty. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed my methods. I'd love to hear from you guys, see what you guys do differently, what you guys are researching. Let me know in the comment section. Till the next time we're cutting up, stay sharp. I'll see you in the next one. Yo, what the bull that one tonight with everything I drop on Sky Brook, man?